Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We are back. We are on, and the Reverend Dr. Danielle Buhuro is ready to go. Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
So good to see everybody here. Happy New Year. We are excited to be back. Oh, thank you so much for your prayers. I was a little bit under the weather, Diane, so I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten to call you. Thank you so much, everybody. So good to see you. And I am super excited about this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful topic that we have going on today. Reverend Pastor Jackson and I talked, and we were scratching our heads in the wheelhouse, saying what should be the topic to kick off for this Tuesday, brand new, brand new Bible study at 12 noon on Tuesdays. What should be the topic? And Pastor Jackson thought about this wonderful idea of how do we look at uh, historical violence to African American persons and the trauma that causes. And in particular, how do we focus on the story of Emmett Till? And so that is the backdrop for our conversation, for our time together. And so I want to invite you first and foremost, I'm going to share my screen. And while I'm getting ready to share my screen, I'm going to ask that you grab pen and paper because today is going to be the introductory session for our Bible studies where I'm going to make some reflective questions for us to think about and reflect on. And so please, please, please go grab pen and paper so that you can write these thought-provoking questions down so that during our time together, you will have answers and responses that you can be sitting with and germinating on and simmering within your consciousness. The backdrop, as we said, for our time together, given our topic, is focused on the Emmett Till story. This is a story that is nothing new to us. We remember this story because for those of us in this Chicagoland, Indiana area, we remember this story because it touched us. It feels like it reached home to us. This is the story of this young boy, 14 years old, African American young man named Emmett Till, lives here in Chicago with his mother, Mamie Till. And he begs his mom one day, can you please, please, please allow me to go down south to Money, Mississippi to visit with relatives and other family members. And I promise to be a good boy, and I promise I will be back. And so our sister, mother, Mamie Till, she struggles. She struggles. She's nervous. She doesn't know how her city boy will be. This is in the 1960s. She doesn't know how her city boy will be. 1955, I'm sorry, 1955 to be exact. She doesn't know how her city boy will be during this period of Jim Crow lynchings, hate that continues to rear its ugly head, especially in the South. She doesn't know how he will be in the midst of this social and political unrest, primarily occurring in the southern states of the so-called United States of America. So she's scared, she's nervous, but because of his begs, but because of his pleas, she gives in and says, okay, you could visit. And that decision was the decision that would change the course of her life forever. You know the story. This boy, this baby, our beloved Black boy, goes down to Money, Mississippi, and becomes entangled in he say, she say, where a white woman accuses him of making a sexual pass at her. And as a result, when she tells her husband, then he organizes a lynching mob, kidnaps young Emmett Till in the middle of the night from the home he was staying in with his uncle and cousins and other family members. And he is unfortunately beaten and killed. His body is dumped in a particular river down in Money, Mississippi, attached to a cotton gin fan, and where his body sinks and he drowns and he dies. And so this story was known as the story that would kick off the civil rights movement. This story is the story that would kick off the civil rights movement. What do I mean by that? As the story is told, according to the foundings of the civil rights era, it is Rosa Parks who hears about this gruesome, grotesque event that occurs to this baby. And some would say later that it is this story that inspires her to remain seated on a bus seat and leads to the encounter or altercation of her being arrested. And then this event leads to the young Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who we celebrated his birthday 2 days ago. He would have been 93 years old had he still been alive today. It is this event of watching Rosa Parks become arrested because she refuses to give up her seat on a bus, which inspires Martin Luther King to begin the civil rights movement. And so we tend to say in the field of African American studies that had it not been for Emmett Till's body being lynched, that would not have inspired Rosa Parks, which in turn would not have inspired Martin Luther King Jr. And so we tend to say that Emmett Till's murder, which is later state sanctioned by the government of Money, Mississippi, becomes the starting point that gives way to the birth of the civil rights movement. And so we're going to spend some time talking about this story. Why do we talk about this story? This story also has received major news attention in light of a wonderful story or depiction of this story currently being featured on Hulu. We want to ask, as a part of Bible study, we want to ask if you would please stream this series currently on Hulu. Currently on Hulu. You can stream it on Hulu. It's also available to watch on ABC. And so the name of this story is Women of the Movement, the story of Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till. The title again of the series on television that's been streaming right now on Hulu and ABC7 is Women of the Movement, the story of Emmett Till and Mamie Till. And these are the lead actress and actor in the film. And so we're going to ask that you please check out this series, because we're going to be talking about this series as it relates to the story and talking about in particular specific details. And so when you go to Google this series, if you're not currently already watching it, please make sure you're looking at the right series that has this particular woman and this particular young man as the actress and lead actor in the series. We're also going to ask you to simply go to Google. You want to simply go to Google and pick up a particular study guide. We're going to also work off of a particular study guide. And so please, please, please write this down. We don't want you to miss this. We don't want you to miss this. We don't want you to miss this. There's a particular study guide that we want you to work off of as well. And the name of the study guide is The Eyes on the Prize Guide. The Eyes on the Prize Study Guide. Please write that down. The Eyes on the Prize Study Guide. The Eyes on the Prize Study Guide. So, if you haven't also watched the series Eyes on the Prize, we want to also invite you to check out that series. Simply Google Eyes on the Prize. You can find that series on Amazon Prime Video. You can also find the series on HBO Max. It's also available for free on YouTube, at many YouTube channels as well. And so in this series, it's about 7 or 8 episodes that are really, really, really cool. And the series created its own study guide with the series. And so we're going to not only be looking at the current streaming service of the particular movie on Hulu called Women of the Movement, but we're also going to be looking at the Eyes on the Prize series as well as this particular study guide. And so there are some reflective questions that we're going to pose for today. We're not going to answer these questions. This is just the introduction. We're going to get into the answers to these questions on next Tuesday. But this is just the introduction for today. There are particular questions that we want you to reflect on. And so you will see them here on your screen. I'm going to go over these questions again. If you Google Eyes on the Prize Study Guide, it's about 6 pages long. And these particular questions are on page 2 of the study guide. These particular questions are on page 2 of the study guide. So question number 1 for us to delve into is segregation was a social system based on a long history of prejudices and discriminations, and in some sense was deeply entrenched in people's minds as well as in the culture. How did segregation manifest itself in daily life in the South? How did segregation disenfranchise Black Americans? We also want you to be thinking about another topic or question, if you will. Why do you think the lynching of Emmett Till became a catalyst in the national movement for civil rights? Why do you think the lynching of Emmett Till became a catalyst in the national movement for civil rights? Another question, what choices did the family of Emmett Till and their supporters make in exposing the brutality of his murder? How did these choices shape public reaction to the murder? We're going to post a link to this study guide on the church Facebook page. So you can also visit the church Facebook page and you'll see a link to this study guide as well. So we can make sure to get the right study guide. Question number 4, in what ways did the media educate the nation about the events in Mississippi and Montgomery? In what ways did the media educate the nation about the events in Mississippi and Montgomery? What means were available to disenfranchised Blacks in America to fight segregation? How did people summon the courage to confront the intimidation, brutality, and injustice they faced under the Jim Crow system? If you follow this Eyes on the Prize Study Guide's matching movie or series, you will know that the name of the series is called Eyes on the Prize. Why do you think this title was chosen? What is the prize being sought in this episode? What was the prize being sought in this episode? Other key reflective questions in this guide around or related to this story of Emmett Till are these particular questions. What did the reactions to the brief interaction between Emmett Till and Carolyn Bryant, the white woman in the store, expose about the social system that supported segregation? Why do you think Till's actions sparked such violence? Curtis Jones was playing checkers with an older man who warned him that Bryant was likely to react violently to Till's innocent comments. Why did he know? What did he know that the boys did not know? How do people learn the rules and customs of a society? How are these rules and customs enforced? What is the role of intimidation, lynching, and fear in a segregated society? Till's uncle, Mose Wright, would not go to the police. In a democracy, what institutions are responsible for protecting the vulnerable? What options do individuals and groups have when these institutions cannot be trusted? So I'm going to pause here for a second. Again, we're going to post the link to this study guide. We're going to post a link to this study guide, and there's other questions in this study guide for us to reflect on. And we're gonna take each one of these questions throughout our Bible study time together over the next month. And we're gonna delve into each one of these questions in this study guide. Why do you think Mamie Till Mosley decided to show the public her son's mutilated body? What was the role of the Black press in exposing the violence of the Jim Crow system? Why do you think mainstream press was initially reluctant to publish the photographs of Emmett Till? What role can the press play in exposing injustice? Are there news stories that have led you to express outrage or influenced you to take action? Provocative questions for us to reflect on. Why were Black Americans afraid to testify against whites in the South? What does their fear reveal about justice in the South at that time? What, in your opinion, compelled Wright, who knew the dangers of speaking out, to step up and testify against the murderers? How did Wright's actions and testimony make him a symbol of the emerging civil rights movement? These particular questions are the questions that we're going to delve into in this 6-page study guide. Again, you can simply Google Eyes on the Prize study guide, and it's 6 pages. It's 6 pages long, and this will pop up as a PDF. We're going to post the link on the church's social media page, so you will have this direct link. There are some other questions that we need to grapple with that I add to this study guide. Let's go deep, family. Let's go deep. There's some other questions that I add to this study guide, and I know Pastor Jackson also will add to this study guide. And so let me just say this. I have struggled with the story of Emmett Till for years. It is a painful story. And for me, more than just vigilante justice, more than just the plight of a young Black boy, there are some things that have made me say, in this story. There are some things that have made me say, And so I'm going to delve deeper with asking us some deeper reflective questions that we are going to wrestle with over the next month as we talk about this particular story. Please write these questions down. Please write these questions down in your notepad. Number one, I have wrestled with, did Emmett Till's mom wrestle with or struggle with guilt for her decision to allow her son to go down south? How did that guilt show up for her for the rest of her life? I've often wondered about what was it like for her to deal with the guilt that she experienced with making this decision to say, yes, you can go down south, Emmett. Yes, you can go down south. The second piece that I've wrestled with, the second theme or dynamic that I have wrestled with, that I pose as a question for us to reflect on is, if you remember the specific event of Emmett Till being at a particular grocery store, he was at a particular grocery store, and he was with his cousins, and friends of the family down south. Apparently, many of his cousins that he was visiting down south, they were originally from and still living in Money, Mississippi. So they were aware of the custom, the customary practices, the rituals, the traditions around you don't interact with white people and you don't say anything that could be conceived as sexually provocative to white women. We have a history in our country of lynchings that have taken place because of the word of a white woman and what a white woman has said. If you haven't already checked out this film, I want to invite you to check out this film entitled Rosewood that talks about the ways in which an entire Black community was massacred because of what a white woman stated that a Black man had done to her. She stated that a Black man had sexually assaulted her. And as a result, the white men in the town seek vigilante justice and basically destroy the entire Black community in the film, Rosewood. I will also invite you to turn to The Plight of Black Wall Street. If you've never heard of that historical story of the burning down of Black Wall Street, I want to invite you to check that out. Same dynamic. A white woman accuses a Black man of making a sexually inappropriate statement to her. And as a result, the white men in the town seek justice by burning down the particular businesses owned and operated by Black men and women. This particular area or community was known as Black Wall Street. And literally, these white men burned down the entire town and community because of the words of a white woman that would later turn out to be untrue. And so, no different to Emmett Till's story, I began to wonder, a second reflective piece for me, in addition to grappling with the guilt that Mamie Till experienced, I began to wonder, why did the cousins not step in? Why did these cousins, these family members with Emmett, warn him and say, no, you don't have to go in and say anything to this woman? As the story is told, one of the cousins and friends of the family gambled with Emmett and asked him to bet whether or not he could get the phone number of this white woman in this grocery store and basically flirt with her. And I began to get saddened by this dynamic because in some sense I said, a simple, childish, inappropriate bet or wager cost Emmett Till his life. So I began to wonder, why didn't his family warn him? The other young boys. Why didn't the other young boys say, no, Emmett, don't go in there and do this, right? Is the blood of Emmett Till on his family relatives' hands? Third reflective question that I have grappled with is, as the story is told, an angry mob in the middle of the night. Now, because Emmett Till's interaction with this white woman, and this white woman goes home later and tells her husband, yeah, he whistled at me or he made a sexual advancement towards me. Her white husband organizes a white angry mob to go to Emmett's uncle's home, Mose Wright's home, and they basically kidnap him in the middle of the night. I have wrestled with, would I have done what Emmett's uncle did? An angry mob shows up, bangs on the door, and says, "Hey, you have a nephew here visiting from Chicago, do you not? You have a nephew here who made some inappropriate statements to a white woman earlier in town at a grocery store. Turn him over to us." I have wrestled with the why question. Could I have done that? Could I have said, sure, angry mob, you can have the body of my nephew? I've wrestled with why there was no sense of fight that the uncle initiated and said, no, you can't have my nephew over my dead body. I've wondered following that if there had been any tension in the family moving forward between Mamie and her brother. I've wondered if Mamie and her brother were able to reconcile and ever have a healthy relationship. I don't know what I would do if I had sent my son to my brother's home and then my son died under the care and watch of my brother. I don't know if I would have been able to reconcile with my brother. And so I've often wondered what has the relationship between Mamie and her brother have been like up until this moment, and then even after this moment. I wonder, did Mamie have any frustration, tension, anger, sadness with her brother for the fact that her son died while in the care and under the watchful eye of her brother? These are reflective questions that I have grappled, that I have grappled with as it relates to this story. I'll pause there for a moment if there's someone from the audience who wants to say anything, or our pastor wants to pose other reflective questions for us with this story.
I see Ruthie Fordham in addressing one of the questions. She said, I don't know if the mother did, but I would have felt guilty because I didn't want him to go knowing how the South was. And so, so that's the, so far, that's the only response we have. I just wanted to add, I like to hear the stories and the voices of the people that are involved. And so there's a book that will be helpful also in this. It's called Death of Innocence. It is by Mamie Till Mobley, and she tells the story herself. I like those because those are the authorities for me. A lot of people have written about it. In fact, I believe Simeon Rice, the cousin, he has written, and I'll get the name of his book. Those are, for me, those are the authorities on a lot of white people that have written what I'm trying to get at. And there are Black folk who have written who, you know, were not directly involved. They might have gotten information from different people, or they were drawing from different books that they had read on it, and Black and white have written about it. And so those are all right, but I like to read what the folk that were there, that were involved. So those are some. The other thing that in the telling of the story, for me, I don't like that. Well, let me say this. What gets left out is that Emmett's daddy, his father, Emmett was born 1941. His daddy was executed in the army in 1945 based on an accusation of let me get it right, accusation of assaulting 2 white women and murdering a third.
Wow.
The details are so sketchy. John Edgar Wideman, the scholar, I think he's out of Brown University, he has written and addressed that this is so sketchy that it's the charges, like, a lot of times seem made up, and the details of Emmett's daddy, Lewis Till, his execution are not forthcoming. And so I think it you know, it adds to the story that, you know, we don't hear, about Emmett's daddy. His daddy was executed and seemingly unjustly on an accusation about white women, to add to what you were saying. And I do want to also add that Gene Mobley, who in the series you'll see, initially he and Mamie were, they were like most of us, they were kicking it, and they eventually married, but he was extremely supportive for her throughout this time. He would be considered her rock during this time. So I just, those are, there's more, and we'll get to that as we go along. We'll get to more of it. But these are excellent questions to raise up. So Ruthie Fordham says, Emmett may not have known his father at all. He was so young, if that's true. He may not have, but his mother certainly told him what happened. And then Trish Thornton says, Simeon's story, an eyewitness account of the kidnapping of Emmett Till. So Simeon Rice, the cousin, Trish Thornton put the title of the book. It's an eyewitness account of the kidnapping of Emmett Till by Simeon Rice. Simeon's story. So
awesome. So we want to invite, thank you so much for this, Pastor. We want to invite people to check out these resources. And please grab these books. Please grab these books, grab these books. And so thank you for these, thank you for these wonderful resources. Please, if you haven't heard of this story before, we would ask that you please check this story out. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this book.
And while you do that, Mike Carson put, I would like to think I would have fought them taking my nephew, but I'm speaking from 2022 Pan-African mentality. Those people were living in a state of terror. So just wanted to.
Let's talk about it. That is wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. Let's grapple with that. That brings up something else for us to talk about. Thank you so much, Mike. Can we compare our standards, our ways of being, of speaking out against injustice in 2022? Can that be compared to 1954 or 1955? We have to take serious and grapple with that question. Thank you so much. For that. On your screen is this book our sister Trish referenced. We're going to invite you to check this out. As our pastor said, it's so important to take in eyewitness accounts, not just what somebody else has told us. And so, yes, if you haven't read this book, please check out this book. Order this book. Another piece, another set of reflective questions that we're going to delve into is, what is the trauma that is created as a result of witnessing violence? So our beloved sister, Mamie Till, leaves the casket opened during Emmett Till's funeral service to show his mangled body, because in some sense she wanted to use the media, the Black press in particular, to highlight atrocities and injustices, particularly of her son, but also against Black people in general in this country. And so she leaves the casket open. And my mom, I remember my mom telling me one day the ways in which, when she was a small girl, she actually attended the funeral service of Emmett Till. When she was a small girl, she remembers, she told me she remembers being 10 or 11 years old when Emmett Till was killed. And she says she remembers her mom taking her to the funeral service at A.A. Rayner held the wake. The funeral service was held at a local Church of God in Christ church. And she says she remembers going to the wake, not the funeral, I'm sorry, the wake at A.A. Rayner Funeral Home. And she tells the story of how to this day, my mom is, to this day, she's in her 60s now. She tells me the story. She can never get that image out of her head. She's never been able to get the image of Emmett Till's mangled body out of her head. She says literally that image has sat with her all these many years. And from time to time, she says she's had nightmares. She's had nightmares since seeing his body as a small child. And so we also have to grapple with, yes, there is wonderful ways in which the media depicts social activism in casting a spotlight on injustice, on trauma today. Let's face it, even today, we would not have been able to know what happens to our beloved brothers and sisters as a result of police violence if people wouldn't capture these images with their cell phone and have these images go viral on social media. We would never have known the story of George Floyd if George Floyd's story was not highlighted for us and captured by the cell phone video of a young Black teenage girl. And so, yes, I understand Mamie Till's desires. And at the same time, I wrestle with, what is the trauma? What is the mental health, long-term psychological and emotional trauma that is now inflicted on viewers of violence? How can watching violence not only gain self-awareness about oppression and atrocity in the world, but also inflict emotional and psychological trauma that we are now left with after constantly viewing these images? And so I want to also have us wrestle with that. How do we get the word out about injustice and at the same time practice self-care and be careful that we're not watching and viewing something that is inflicting internal trauma on us? This is similar to what during African enslavement, white European slave masters would offer public viewings of lynchings. They would not simply offer, but also really force other enslaved bodies to watch a lynching, to be present, to see an actual person being lynched. There are tons of stories if you study the history of lynchings, particularly highlighted by the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. There's tons of stories that talk about the ways in which white racist slave masters intentionally sat out to host public viewings of lynchings to send a message to the other African-American persons that, this same act will be your fate if you are disobedient and resist. And so I'm wondering about this whole conversation of trauma when violence goes viral. I'll pause there for a moment.
Mike Carson said the killers were so bold, they bragged about the murder to Look magazine. Well, that's true. After they were acquitted, they then bragged about it. And we know the white woman, Brian's wife, I forget her first name. She recanted. Yeah, she not recanted. She said, she told she lied, and she was never prosecuted for that. That probably is one of the earliest, it wasn't the earliest, but one of the earliest examples of a Karen.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
getting the authorities to do harm to a Black person. And so the other thing is, and there's several books. Professor Greg Carr and Professor Karen Hunter did a very extensive talk about this, and pointed out that after the trial, up until at least the 80s, that grocery store was still going on.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. And Roy Bryant and his brother and whatnot, they were still moving about the area.
Wow.
So let that sink in when we start thinking about, what I'm thinking.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
So I am excited about all of these wonderful reflective questions that we have posed today, and the ways in which we're going to jump in to this topic on next Tuesday. And so please, please, please check out the series on Hulu. Check out the series on Hulu. It's called Women of the Movement, the story of Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley. Also, please, please, please download the study guide from the Eyes on the Prize. Simply go to your Google and just download Eyes on the Prize study guide. Search that, and a PDF will generate. Eyes on the Prize study guide. Also, check out the Eyes on the Prize series, available for free on either YouTube or Amazon Prime Video or HBO Max. You can also grab some of these wonderful resources that people highlighted in our chat, such as Simeon's story. Please, please, please grab those, as well as the other resources our pastor named. This is going to be an exciting time where we're going to delve deep into this topic of violence and the history of violence against African American persons, and the ways in which now we are forced to wrestle with trauma. So thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. Please, please share this video. Tell a friend to please attend virtually these sessions. As much of what we talk about as it relates to Emmett Till in the 1950s and 60s in this country is still happening today. It's still happening. It's still happening today. So please, please, please to share this video and come back and join us next Tuesday.
Thank you so much. As we get ready to sign off, Trish pointed out that no person with a conscience and a believer of God would have done what Karen did. Karen in quotations. Right, right. Ruthie's excited too, and Ruthie points out on ABC, the third installment of the series is this week. So you can check it out on Hulu and on network TV, ABC. The third installment is this week. So please check it out. And as Dr. Buhuro has said, please download, get that study guide. We're gonna post it on the church's Facebook page, etc. And look forward to this examination on next Tuesday at noon. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please share the video, share it widely with others to join in to create a very intensive discussion. You've already gotten stimulated by the points that Dr. Buhuro has been making for us, and they trigger some stuff. And we need to talk about it, and grow from it and move forward. And so thank you, Mike Carson. Yep, we're diving into some painful stuff. And so we're going, I'm glad we have, Dr. Buhuro to help us walk through the painful stuff. So thank you again, and see y'all on next Tuesday at noon. We'll be at noon. Thank you again.